Hello everyone, I'm here to share with you our presentation, How Do You as Early Childhood Educators Understand Spirituality? I'm Dr. Jennifer Mata McMahon. I'm an Associate Professor of Early Childhood Education at UMBC, and I'm presenting with my Graduate Research Assistant, Shaheen Hossein, who's a doctoral student at UMBC. Our research team is also comprised by Dr. Michael Haslip, an Assistant Professor of Early Childhood Education at Drexel University. We're here to present at the International Association for Children's Spirituality's 2023 Virtual International Symposium, Children's Spirituality, Meeting New Challenges, in July of 2023. So with funding from the Sherman Center for Early Learning in Urban Communities and the Department of Education at UMBC, we continued the work of deep diving into children's spirituality from a holistic child development lens. So centering spirituality as the core of the child in terms of development and in terms of who they are as a human being. So from that lens, finding a place for spirituality in the classroom is not difficult, even if that classroom is a secular setting. So the purpose of our study is to explore teachers' understanding of children's spirituality, to inform ways in which they may nurture and support spirituality in educational settings or in the classrooms in which they teach. So with that purpose, we looked at the literature to establish what was our theoretical framework. So in the literature, children's spirituality is defined as a life force, promoting learning, resilience, and well-being. Also, nurturing spirituality has been found to may improve behavior. So it's obviously not, we don't have solid empirical evidence to prove this, but it's found that there is an improvement anecdotally of behavior in children when spirituality is nurtured in the classroom. It's also been found to be associated with developmentally appropriate practices. Spiritually nurturing environments have been found in the literature to support children's natural curiosity, their wonder, and their self-expression. So how do we define spirituality? And this image that you see here is the cover of my upcoming book. It is set to be copyrighted for 2024, but it's coming out in July of 2023. So hopefully it's out by the time this presentation is being shared. So one of the challenges that is found is that because spirituality is such an ineffable and multifaceted construct, there is difficulty in coming to a consensus by the researchers and scholars in this field on what spirituality is. So there's a wide range of descriptors in terms of as they are associated to spirituality. So spirituality has been described as connectedness, as divine experiences, as inner peace, as a transcendent connection to nature and the universe, and as search for purpose and meaning in life. Spirituality has also been linked to character and character education, to connection, to caring, to confidence, to compassion and competency. In a publication, a book publication that I had in 2015, I defined spirituality as an innate human potential to connect and relate to self, to others, and to the other. And so I'll expand a little bit more of what I mean by that. So from this holistic perspective of child development, centering the spirit of the child as the main core, I define spirituality as an innate human potential or ability to be fully present in order to connect with ourselves, with others, and with the greater other, the intangible other that is beyond us. Some call this intangible other the transcendent or the divine. Others refer to it as energy, and others even call it spirit. So this connection to ourselves, to others, and to the intangible greater other affords us the possibility to relate or be in relation to the spiritual realm and move toward finding meaning and direction in life, rediscovering our purpose as human beings. So spirituality relates to knowing thyself, understanding the reasons for living life, as well as with connecting and relating to everything around us, be it material or be it spiritual, in a profound and meaningful way. And this is part of that book that's coming out with copyright 2024, but it's coming out this year. This image here you see that is part of our definition of spirituality as we try to differentiate it from religiosity or from religion. So in this illustration, the fish represent human beings, the water represents spirituality, and the fish bowl represents religion or religiosity. So we can choose as human beings or as fish in this image to live spirituality through a religious path or through other paths that are not as constraining or directives as a religious path might be. So what did we do? We designed a research study with a mixed methods approach. We used the recently validated IACS, which is the Early Childhood Educators' Spiritual Practices in the Classroom instrument. This was a tool that I initially designed as a survey with my colleagues Michael Hashlip and Deborah Shine back in 2016. We piloted this through 2018 and gathered some data, and then in 2021 we collected data to do a validation study and turned this survey into an instrument that is now has been validated and is out. The research article is, the journal article is now out and available with the initial survey instrument and the now validated instrument. So using that instrument, we collected data to respond to this research question. How do in-service early childhood educators understand children's spirituality? So if you ask a teacher or an early childhood educator, what do you understand spirituality to be? What would they respond? What is their take on it? So what did we do? For data collection, we used the IACS, which is this instrument that I was just talking about. And this instrument includes 5 sections. A section that asks questions regarding the spiritual views and practices that the educators might have. A section that asks about the activities and the curriculum that they might implement. The classroom environment and the schedule, that's another section of questions, and then the interactions and experiences is the 4th section of questions. The 5th section is about demographics. So excluding the demographic information, all of these sections include both rating scale items, so 34 rating scale items, and open-ended questions, so 5 open-ended questions. So the focus of this particular study that we're presenting are the responses to Q7. It's one of the open-ended questions of this instrument that asks the respondents or the teachers, early childhood educators that are responding to the instrument, what do you understand children's spirituality to be? And the scope was the analysis of 318 responses from early childhood educators across the U.S. So the participants, you might be asking, who did we target? Well, we targeted early childhood educators in secular environments. And we got 365 responses across 36 states. So the population that we targeted, again, were these early childhood educators that were in teaching in secular environments, mostly public schools. But yet their gender, their racial and ethnic background, their roles, the years of experience, the student age groups that they were working with, and the school settings, the type of settings, if it was rural or urban or suburban, were all evident of the diverse population in the U.S., across the U.S. as a country, as a nation. So you can see that the highest age group was between 33 and 46, mainly females, and the majority were white, which reflects the profile of the demographics of the teachers currently working in public schools in the U.S. So the focus was on analyzing the responses of the 318 teachers that responded to Q7, because even though we collected 365 responses, not everybody responded to that Q7 question. So what was our data analysis? What did it look like? Well, we used in vivo and open coding, focused and actual coding, following a grounded theory approach. So deductive and inductive analysis of the qualitative data. We also engaged in intercoder negotiation and agreement in order to triangulate to establish data analysis reliability. So in order to look at the data from all different perspectives and ensure that we're not being biased or looking at it from just one angle, we had the three team members code the data and then come together and negotiate the final code book. And so what you see here is the code book that we came up with. And I'm going to explain a little bit what this code book entails. So what we found is, looking at the participants' responses, is that there were three perspectives in responding to this question. So when we asked teachers, what do you understand children's spirituality to be, they responded either from the essence of spirituality, so their response had to do with, in essence, this is what spirituality is, or they responded from looking at where spirituality originates, or what was the source of spirituality. And another type of response, the third type of response, was spirituality as action. So what do we do in order to be spiritual? So these three perspectives, or three types of responses, gave us our response framework. So where were the teachers coming from when they responded to our question? And within that response framework, we found different categories, different codes, and subcodes that emerge from these three perspectives, or three ways of answering our question. So what were the findings? The folks, or the teachers that responded to the question from an essence perspective, which was the most common response, so this had a frequency of 208, came to their understanding of spirituality from different categories. Some of them saw it as a mystical definition or construct. Some of them saw it as a self-created construct. Some of them saw it as, or understood it as, related to values, intrinsic values or societal values that the child might have. And others looked at it from a purpose, meaning, and the role that we play in society perspective. So these are some examples of the highest, from the mystical category, the highest frequency category within this response framework of essence. So this is one teacher responded, what do you understand spirituality to be? As it's their belief in God and how this impacts their actions and the actions around them. Another responded, said they were made by God and can ask God to live in them and learn to live for Christ and know Him and their Savior as they grow. So you can see here in the table to the right that the mystical category was the highest frequency category, and within that mystical category of essence, God with a frequency of 90. And I apologize for the size of these numbers, but we were trying to fit this table into the screen. But the God with a frequency of 9 was the code that had the highest frequency in our entire code book. So that's interesting, because if you remember, we were targeting teachers in secular school environments. And so we were thinking that because they're teaching in secular school environments, perhaps their understanding of spirituality is a little more secular. Yet this is within the context of the U.S. So we're finding that even in secular environments, the highest category of response of how do you understand spirituality comes from this essence, mystical God component. And that's interesting to highlight. So for the response framework of origin was the second most frequent response with 121 responses under this response type. The categories related to defining spirituality as having an external or internal source of origin. And we see that external was higher with 71 responses than internal that had a frequency of 50. And this is one example of teachers that responded in this with this approach of where spirituality originates from. I believe children's spirituality is how they are brought up and what the parent believes. So the external component, a lot of our respondents were coming from it to the definition of children's spirituality from the perspective of this is the parents or the family's role, and the parents and the families are the ones that are in charge of teaching spirituality to the children, and this is sort of where it originates for them. Lastly, our third category of response was action, and this had a frequency of 86. And within actions, we found the categories of the codes toward others with 48 frequency, toward surroundings with 13 frequency, religious mindset and practices with 12, meditation and mindfulness with 6, and playing and discussing with 6. So remember that action, those that define spirituality from an actions perspective were thinking that it's what we do that makes us spiritual, right? So these are some examples of those kinds of responses. How they connect with the people and environment around them is what makes them spiritual. And then treating others with respect, following rules as not to infringe on anyone else, doing their best is what constitutes spirituality for children, according to these early childhood educators. So what are our conclusions? Well, this is the first comprehensive study of early childhood educators' views on children's spirituality in secular environments in the U.S. So that is, I think, a solid contribution to the literature. The other thing that we're highlighting here is the importance of spirituality for safeguarding developmentally appropriate practices in early childhood education, which is really important because it has been found in the literature that there is a relationship between spirituality and developmentally appropriate practices. So it seems, and again, there's no empirical evidence yet for this, but it seems as if the more we support spirituality in educational environments, the more we adapt, or the more we get closer to providing developmentally appropriate types of learning and teaching experiences for children. So another interesting conclusion that we arrived at is that spirituality seems to be conceptualized by early childhood educators as essence, origin, and action. But even within those differentiations, there's a strongly understanding of spirituality related to a belief environment, even when we're targeting teachers in secular environments. So that's interesting to note. And there seems to also be clear evidence of early childhood educators supporting and nurturing children's spirituality in secular educational environments across the country, because even though we're not presenting here the findings from the other sections of the instrument, it was noted by everybody that responded that there was at least something that they were doing in their activities, in the classroom curriculum, in the environment, how the environment was set up, in the time that it was allocated for these kinds of activities or experiences that the teachers were doing in order to support spirituality for the children that they worked with. Regarding future research, the next steps for us is to analyze the Q7 data by groups. So you might be thinking, well, who are these teachers that are responding to what do you understand children's spirituality to be from this essence perspective, particularly from this mystical view, looking at spirituality from something that is about God or related to God in some way. So who are they in terms of age, in terms of years of experience, in terms of grade levels of children that they're working with, in terms of area of the U.S., which states are they coming from or which region, or what kind of settings do they work in. Are these rural teaching teachers, or are they from urban or suburban areas? And so that's what we're trying to do now, is to establish the demographics of these groups of responses and do comparison across them. Those are some of our next steps. Another one is to validate the study, which has already been done, so that with the validation of this instrument, which the publication came out very recently, and I've linked there where you can download a copy of the instrument, of the article, and the article has 3 supplemental materials in which one of them is the actual validated instrument. And here you see an image of the IACS as in its validated form in the section 1, the first section that asks questions regarding spiritual views and practices in the classroom. And this is where Q7, in this first section is where Q7 is located. We're really excited about this, and we hope that you are able to explore it and use it, because we are currently using it and collecting data from over 500 U.S. educators across the U.S., encompassing all 50 states. And that data, we're currently in the process of collecting those data, and the analysis from that is going to further expand the findings that we had for Q7 and other questions. Looking at the rating scale items, responses for those 500 plus educators is also sort of on our list of to-do for future research. And more internationally, I'm looking to use the IACS instrument and adapt it and translate it to other languages, and be able to use it to collect data from educators from different contexts and compare these different populations to see what are the similarities and the differences across teachers, say, teaching in Latin America versus those who are teaching in the U.S., or teachers in areas of Africa or Asia versus those teaching in the U.S. So that are interesting next steps for us in this research. So our references are here. Again, the link is in the slide before to the article for the validation study, and here are references that we use throughout. And this is us. Thank you very much for sharing your time with us and for your interest in the topic of children's spirituality.